Chapter 29 Long Chen's Shock. There were around 7 or 8 people in that group, and Long Chen could clearly see that the Grand Xia's prince Xia Chengfang was amongst them. But what shocked Long Chen the most was that familiar face beside him. That woman was very slender and fair, but her face always had a faint arrogance on it. It was the crazy woman that Long Chen had encountered at the Alchemist Guild. Why was she there? And why did she seem so familiar with Grand Xia's prince? Long Chen simply couldn't figure it out. Their group entered an expensive tea house just after he noticed them. One of those people is the fourth prince, Chu Yao warned Long Chen, as she had also seen those people. The fourth prince? He was supposed to be the most low-key prince. He never participated in the internal fights of the princes. But then why was he with Grand Xia's prince? He has also changed his appearance, but his finger has a ring mark on it that he forgot to hide. He normally wears a dragon ring with a very distinctive pattern, so I easily recognize it, said Chu Yao. As a princess, she might have to act arrogant every day, but she was also very perceptive to the everyday habits of each prince. Thus, she was easily able to see through the fourth prince's disguise. Long Chen felt a headache coming. Why would the fourth prince disguise himself? He wanted to sneak in and use his divine sense to secretly eavesdrop. However, the door was guarded by a dozen of the Grand Xia's elite troops. Doing so would simply be too difficult. It was in the middle of the day, and trying to sneak in would basically be impossible. He gave up on that idea. Chu Yao, I'm going to go back and prepare some ingredients that will dissolve the foreign spiritual energies in your dantian, said Long Chen. Despite being reluctant to part, she still obediently nodded her head. Long Chen went directly home. As soon as he walked past the gate, a happy shout rang out. Brother Long! Wild was a small giant now, and he excitedly looked at Long Chen. The current Wild had become much livelier, and the thing that pleased Long Chen the most was that he was no longer as thin as he had been before. His arms were clearly bigger, and some indistinct veins could be seen underneath the skin. How have you been? Have you been eating properly, Wild? Long Chen patted his sturdy arm. Brother Long, I eat until I'm full every day. I feel like I've become very strong now. Thus, I want to be with Brother Long so that I can protect you. Wild slapped his chest confidently, emitting a sound like a thunderous drum. Long Chen nodded and brought Wild into his own room. He then used his divine sense to examine Wild's body. What? Despite nourishing them all this time and feeding them so much, still less than 10% of Wild's cells were active. When he examined his 4 meridians, he noticed that they had expanded a little. But most shocking of all was that there was what seemed to be a trace of spiritual ki within his dantian. You learned how to cultivate? Asked Long Chen. Brother Long, what is this cultivating? Asked Wild with wide eyes. Ah, never mind. Long Chen also didn't feel like trying to explain such a thing. Continuing his examination, he noticed that Wild's dantian was deathly still. But there was still a steady flow of the world's spiritual ki that was flowing into his dantian. What an abnormal constitution. Even without cultivating, it just automatically absorbs energy on its own. Long Chen sucked in a breath of cold air. This was something he had never encountered before. Wild's dantian held a huge amount of spiritual ki, which meant that once his body was strong enough, he would be able to automatically absorb spiritual ki from heaven and earth to use. If other martial artists were to learn of this, they would definitely go crazy. This meant that even when Wild was sleeping or eating, he would still be incessantly cultivating. Wild, I'm going to teach you a few simple cultivation methods and how to use your dantian's ki. Due to how unique Wild's Danshin was, Long Chen decided not to teach him any battle skills. Wild only had 4 meridians, which meant that he wouldn't be able to use any battle skills for now. So Long Chen only taught him how to circulate his spiritual ki to his arms and legs, passively increasing their strength. But Long Chen had still overestimated Wild's ability and comprehension skills. Even as something as simple as linking his Danshin required 6 hours of Long Chen's time to explain. Despite having Long Chen's throat turn raw, Wild was still mystified. Long Chen knew he couldn't get angry. Wild was listening to him completely innocently, so his belly full of anger was never released. Okay, how about this? Until you learn this, I'll work you to death. Long Chen helplessly sighed. I'm sorry, Brother Long. I'm just too stupid. I could spend a lifetime without figuring this out. Wild dejectedly hung his head. Wild truly was too incompetent. He was unable to immerse himself even slightly within his Danshin. He couldn't even find where his Danshin was. Long Chen was unwilling to resign himself to this result. Wild's physique was so powerful that it was frightening. If he had the assistance of his spiritual ki, the power which he could explode out with would be absolutely terrifying. Long Chen felt that it was such a waste. He felt like a beggar who had a mountain of gold, yet still relied on begging to pass each day. Suddenly, Long Chen's eyes brightened. Placing his hand on Wild's back, he said, "Let me help you find your Danshin." His spiritual strength poured into Wild's Danshin. Since Wild trusted Long Chen completely, there wasn't the slightest resistance. Long Chen easily merged his spiritual strength into Wild's Danshin. Furthermore, even if Wild had wanted to resist, he didn't know how to. But at least now Wild had found the position of his Danshin. Now that you've found your Danshin, the next step is to immerse into it. Immerse. Use your intent to hook yourself into your Danshin. Intent? Long Chen sighed, but he still patiently controlled his temper. Focus your entire mind onto your Danshin. Oh, then what? Try to make it revolve. Clockwise or counterclockwise? ... Long Chen was practically speechless. It doesn't matter. As long as it circulates, it's fine. Now that he had found its position, Wild slowly tried to control his Danshin. However, it was as if the Danshin weren't even his, and he was unable to move it at all. You're not focused enough. Close your eyes and try again. Finally, under Long Chen's great expectations, Wild's Danshin moved slightly. Although doing just that wasn't exactly using his Danshin, at least he had found it and opened the path. Long Chen relaxed slightly. Good. Next, I'll use my spiritual strength to guide your Danshin's ki for 1 cycle. Remember how I'm doing this. After saying this, Long Chen's spiritual strength circulated into Wild's Danshin. When Wild's Danshin felt Long Chen's spiritual strength, it was as if it had been provoked and immediately exploded out. The originally completely calm Danshin was immediately like an erupting volcano, like angry waves trying to swallow the sky. Wild, can you control your Danshin? Long Chen started to celebrate, but no, I don't know what happened. Wild was completely shocked at the uprising of spiritual ki within him. Don't be afraid. Remember the path I'm taking. Long Chen didn't feel like telling him the position of each one of his acupuncture points. He wouldn't be able to remember them anyways, so he skipped that. Having him remember the feeling of where they were was good enough. Long Chen used his spiritual strength to draw Wild's Danshin ki into his arm. Long Chen wanted to go slowly and circulate it. How could he have predicted that as soon as Wild's ki reached his arm, it would become like a wild horse and refuse to be controlled by Long Chen anymore? Wild energy surged out. Wild felt a great power pass through his arm, so he instinctively punched out. Boom! The entire roof was shaken to pieces. Smoke and dust exploded out, revealing the sky above. What a berserk energy! Long Chen was extremely alarmed. All this had just been by the wind from Wild's fist. But it was already so frightening. If someone was actually hit by this fist, wouldn't they be smashed into a pulp? Wild was also stupefied at his own power. He had never thought he would have such strength. Long Chen once more examined Wild's Xianxia and found that the spiritual key within had basically all been depleted. Wild, go back and rest. Remember what I've taught you and train every day. Don't goof off, ordered Long Chen solemnly. Wild's comprehension skills were already extremely low. If he was lazy as well, then a divine immortal would be unable to teach him. And even a divine immortal would be unable to teach him. Don't worry, Brother Long. I'll train like my life depends on it. Wild was filled with excitement now. After Wild left, Long Chen speechlessly looked at the roofless room. Just what secret was hidden within Wild's body? That fist had even shocked Long Chen. If that long-eyebrowed blood condensation expert was hit by it, it was doubtless that he would die. But right now, 90% of Wild's cells were still dormant. If they were all awoken, even Long Chen would feel tremendous fear. But thinking about Wild's simple and honest nature, Long Chen shook his head. Wild was his brother, and the stronger he was, the better. There was no need to worry. Taking out a piece of paper, he wrote down a list of 48 names of medicinal ingredients. Star-fusing pill, a second-tier medicinal pill. Right now, I have no way of refining an upper-grade second-tier medicinal pill. Looks like I can only grow to Grandmaster Yunqi. But first, I need to collect all the medicinal ingredients. According to Long Chen's recollections, the star-fusing pill should be able to resolve the foreign spiritual energies within Chu Yao's body, but it had to be an upper-grade pill. The current Long Chen's pill flame was too weak. Despite how much talent he had in that regard, it was impossible for him to refine a high-grade second-tier pill with such a pill flame. The next day, Long Chen left his house. Arriving at the Alchemist Guild's storeroom, he handed his list over. What was outside Long Chen's expectations was that all the ingredients could be found here, except one of the main ingredients, the star-fusing grass. Star-fusing grass was an extremely precious treasure. It was something that could be used to refine many second-tier pills, and in fact, most second-tier pills actually required it in their pill formula, making it always in short supply. Long Chen nodded. Only missing one ingredient was already better than what Long Chen had expected. Collecting his ingredients and leaving the Alchemist Guild, Long Chen suddenly saw a certain figure. A slightly cruel smile appeared on his mouth. Chapter 29, End.